Hello, I'm corporate sponsored Ganzaki, and this is the Coca-Cola podcast. I'm here with the Midnight Fox, which means special episode, and Eddie Phoenix is around here somewhere,
I'm gonna
right?
smack you for the Coca-Cola thing.
I'm special ed tonight.
um, Tonight we're going to be talking about video games and their movie tie-ins because, well, it's always worth it. Yay. Video games. That's what we talk about here. So why are we bringing up movies? Because there are some good movies, there are some bad movies, and there are some ugly movies. And then there are movies with Clint Eastwood in them. I haven't a clue where I'm going with that. Anyway, we're going to start off talking about movies based on games, um, which makes sense. If you're going to go for a story, why not go for a story that's already been written for you? Which is a hint to some people. The story's already been written for you. I'm looking at you, Uva Bowl.
You know what I hate though is when they do the story, but then they completely go off of the game, a la Resident Evil.
Well, which Resident Evil?
I'm gonna say pretty much across the board. I mean, yeah, they've got the characters, but the actual storyline. I mean, when they said Nemesis, I'm thinking, my goodness, man, I'm gonna get to see this guy. He's gonna be chasing her around, and then you barely got to see the guy the entire game. Nemesis, whenever I played Resident Evil 3, I always loved fighting him. It was fun. You know, he'd come out, stars.
Yeah, I think the in the Resident Evil category, their problem was they had a little too much story. It should be a heavily action-based game or or heavily action-based movie. If you're going to do one with Nemesis in it, at least, or it's got to be a subdued movie. And they didn't know whether they wanted to be subdued or action, so they went for both, and it sucked. The problem I
I
have
will
with
honestly
it though
say,
is,
though,
hmm?
looking at the trailer for the one that's coming out, Retribution, out of all, Afterlife was pretty good. The first one, eh. The second one, eh. Degeneration went about as close to the actual game as possible, but of course we know that with CGI. Afterlife was, they had actually gotten to a point where there was a pretty decent story, and from what I'm looking at on Retribution, when I look on IMDb, Retribution actually looks to be a really good movie. But we'll have to see when it comes out because, you know, whenever they put out a movie, it's always the best clips out of the movie. Sometimes lives up to what you see. Sometimes it's actually a big flop and they get those few scenes that actually are pretty cool.
Talking about trailers, the one thing that annoys me is when they throw in a line that it looks awesome in the trailer, but when you actually see it in the movie, you can tell that it only existed for the trailer.
Yeah, can't say I disagree on that.
Like,
What do you think, Eddie?
That I agree with the whole. Hey, if you put a line in, put it in the movie too. Don't just make it to where it's a trailer exclusive. Don't be stupid like that. But
Yeah.
other than that, yeah.
I will say what looks really good. The Silent Hill, the first one actually stayed pretty close to the game. I give kudos to the makers of the movie. They did somewhat stay along the lines of the movie. I know it was a little more toned down. Well, what would you say, Jen? Was it more toned down or a little more hyped up than the movie on the first Silent Hill?
The first Silent Hill movie, I'd
Yeah.
say it. Given it was a Hollywood movie, it was a little overboard for what you'd expect of Silent Hill, but it wasn't so bad. There are much worse movies out there. Again, Super Mario.
Oh god, don't even get me started.
And the funny thing is, I like Super Mario movie. if I'm watching it ironically, but as a series movie, it sucks.
Yeah, it even the guy who played the main character of Mario hated the role.
But I'll tell you what, in 2012 they found a use for the Goomba. Just go watch The Amazing Spider-Man.
Pretty
Reusing
much.
costumes. I think the big thing on movies, based on games though, is it's a lot less than wanting to pay tribute to the game and more about wanting to make a quick buck. Because what's going to sell more than the Prince of Persia movie? Everyone likes the Prince of Persia games, so let's make a movie about it and wring the quarters out of them.
That's what
What-
all they were thinking was $, $, $, ding, 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 ding.
And I can't say that the movie really lived up to the series. It was a disappointment.
Yeah, the action scenes were fine, but Prince of Persia is definitely one of the games where the aesthetic and the story were just as good as the gameplay. And the gameplay turns into the action here, but the story is not it's not really there, yet it's impenetrable. And the setting, it just isn't very fun to look at. That and they whitewash the entire crew. Which is another annoying thing in stuff like this. Especially M. Night Shyamalan needs to learn this. Asian people are not white.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like when you get on and kind of get on those kinds of things, if you're looking at things that are coming from either adaptations from games or anime for that matter to movies, do it right. Don't try to make it live action because live action sucks.
I don't know. Live action.
It depends on the source material.
Dragon Ball Evolution and
Yes, that's the one I
The
was thinking of.
and The Last Airbender. No.
I actually
Those
think The
should've
Last
been
Airbender
touched.
could have worked. Dragon Ball really can't work because a lot of the stuff that goes on there just doesn't transition well to special effects. But Avatar had a possibility and they just failed.
Hi, I'm Goku, and I'm this awkward freaking awkward high schooler going through stupid crap.
Yeah, but that's the
fuck?
standard Hollywood stereotype, the awkward teenager. They need that. If they don't have that, they're confused.
The Fox giving off props. What do you guys? Have either of you been able to look at the new Silent Hill coming out?
Nope.
Look at
Wasn't
the
even aware
that
there
one
was.
actually looks pretty good.
Yeah. Be sure to look into it after the podcast. So yeah, there are generally good movies based on games, but few and far between, mostly because Uwe Boll gets hold of them, and he cares a lot less about making a good dollar and a lot more about continuing his movie Ponzi scheme. So, moving on to the other end of the spectrum, the games based on movies. Big problem here is that we currently have games that a good major release in today's market needs to have a couple of years of development time and a very large budget. Budgets in about the range of a movie or more.
And then
And
the problem is making the money back on that.
It's a pain in the ass.
it shouldn't be a problem making the money back on it, because the big problem that these games normally, or at least used to, people are wising up, but they used to sell very well because they were tied into a popular movie, like the Ghostbusters games from the NES. Not very good, but tied into the Ghostbusters movies. And the idea I'm stabbing at is they normally get about a year of development time. So a lot of these games you'll see are based on something else, like the recent Transformers movies might as well be Gears of War with Transformer skins over them. and the driving or the transformed sequence of the games don't even make sense half the time. So it's normally a mess because they just don't have the development time. They have the budget, but they can't do it right. To do it right, they would need a much larger studio.
And
Which
I even played one of the Transformers games, and yeah, the game didn't even. And this is, Transformers goes back years between the toys, the cartoons, so on and so forth. But even in the game didn't live up back to the movie. But that's what you were going into, was the time period. You have so much time to bank on the popularity of that movie. Like, let's say they didn't go with the actual whole idea of completely based on the Joker with the last Batman that was released. Well, no, it was probably the one before. Can't remember the last one that was released.
It was
But
the Dark Knight you're talking about, yes?
Yes,
Yeah.
when they released Arkham Asylum. And that was really good. But they were playing on the popularity that as Christopher Nolan took over that franchise, he created out of bringing back the darkness that Batman was really about, instead of going with the Tim Burton cartoony characters.
Well, the Tim Burton cartoon characters, like back in the 90s when it came with like Batman the Animated Series, that one was rather dark, and that's where you had your icons come from. You had your Kevin Conroy, and you had Mark Hamill coming from that cartoon. So really, I think what people were trying to they were really cringing from still, and what they were really, glad that they brought it back from, was from like the last live action movie with Batman and Robin, with George Clooney playing the main role of Batman, and that movie was terrible.
Okay, let's be honest. Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze never had an Austrian accent that I know of.
I liked Arnold as Mr. Freeze just for the puns.
But that was all it was about, was the puns with him. Because he just...
But that's
Mr.
what Arnold
Freeze.
Schwarzenegger does. He stands there, he says a pun, and then he shoots something.
But
I don't
Mr.
even think he
Freeze
was
always-
originally cast for the movie. I think he just showed up on set in a freeze suit, and they just had to film around him.
You're going to put me in this movie, or otherwise I will put you on ice. Oh, why did I just do
remember
that?
watching the animated series back in the 90s, and even through the comic books and stuff, and Mr. Freeze was more of living up to what his name was. He was cold-hearted. His story did revolve around being in love, but he wasn't cracking puns every time he was trying to take down Batman. It was all about business.
Yes, he was.
Which
Back
was a
in the
big problem
90s
with Batman and Robin, is that they didn't really follow the characters. They turned Robin into a bigger bitch. Bane had absolutely no personality. Mr. Freeze was a walking pun machine, and Poison Ivy was a lesbian. So I think she might have had the closest to actual characters. Yes, and Alfred's daughter, or Alfred's granddaughter or niece or whatever, didn't have a British accent.
Yeah, Alicia Silverstone. Yeah, that was just horrible casting, and
They should feel bad for it.
I'm gonna
They
go
should
out
feel-
like a Barbie doll and kick some rear end, and my hair will never even get messed up. How
Yeah, and the character who needs bat nipples the most did not have bat nipples. The sad fact of
I
life.
need to nurse. They could have
Oh boy.
that much enjoyment out of it, but yeah, comparing that, the Tim Burton Bane, I just laughed every time I saw it. You know, and that's all you get out of him.
Yeah, that's what they were
Whereas,
playing. Definitely playing him for laughs because whenever he was asked to do or told to do something, he would just say a single line in a gruff voice and then shuffle off. He's like a little Igor, or little. He's like a big Igor character.
and I think that really made a lot of Batman followers mad because anybody who's followed the actual storyline of the comics knows that, Bane was serious. Bane is the man who took Batman out for an extended amount of time by breaking his back. So, I say again, kudos to Christopher Nolan for going back to the dark area that Batman is really all about. That is the whole idea of a vigilante. He's not out there to crack jokes. He's out there to serve justice.
Yeah, I actually like Batman and Robin, but I view it as a throwback to the 1960s campy Batman. It's a comic book movie. I look at
Yeah.
it as it was supposed to be funny, and people were just taking it too seriously at the time,
And
which isn't a
Nomad
bad
is
thing because you should accept good out of your movies. It's not a good movie; it's just a funny movie.
and Nomad is still jealous of Jeff Dunham and his Batmobile.
Everyone is jealous of Jeff Dunham and his Batmobile. I want that thing. But good game-based movies, I think I found normally work off the framework of their sequels, essentially. Like my favorite is Spider-Man 2. They got a lot of things right in that by going back to Spider-Man 1 and reworking it. Because Spider-Man 2 has the best web swinging mechanics of any Spider-Man game they've released.
Yes, I will agree with you on that. Spider-Man 2 is really good. The Harry Potters, they
Oh
had
yeah,
years to plan them. They were really close to the actual game, but I think J.K. Rowling had a play in that, especially like she did with the last movie. It has to be broken into two parts. You're putting everything in there. I think she wanted everything across her board between her books, her movies, and even a video game associated with it to all pop together.
Mhm. I
That's the
played the
idea.
first half of those games on Game Boy actually, and the one thing I had to note is the first Harry Potter game for Game Boy was horrible, and I'm going to assume that's pretty much the way it was across the board. It wasn't a very good game. The second one, however, they took the framework, they worked with it, and they turned it into an enjoyable experience. It's actually one of my favorite games you can play on the Game Boy Advanced.
I
I
think it,
played the first Harry Potter uh, for the PS1. For me, that was eh. I would have to say,
I think it
but
was once I got to PS2. I'm trying to think if it was it wasn't Sorcerer's Stone. That's the first one. I think it was either Prisoner of Azkaban or Goblet of Fires, where they actually started getting pretty good with the graphics, pretty good with learning the spells, and actually sticking with the stories. I mean, you had your few little offshoots, adventures, but
Yeah, that's one thing I'll say. Chamber of Secrets was the one for the Game Boy Advance at least was very loosely related to the movie. They didn't depend on the movie to make their story. They just went from the book. They took what they needed. And the one thing I will note though is gameplay wise, they did not really take the spells. Like the spells were nothing you would see in Harry Potter, or at least the names of them weren't. So they weren't being very good in that regard. But the gameplay was pretty tight and overall good. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think because of the short time frame they have, the first game is usually going to be bad, but as they get better, and they essentially they're taking the first game's development and using it as the beginning of the second game's development's time, which is pretty much the best they can do with a bad situation.
that's the problem. is unless you're planning like multiple movies, so you know you're going to have sequels, don't even plan a game because you got, like you said, you have to have framework to go back and work on. It's just like you're playing Russian roulette with a movie too. You never know whether it's actually going to take off. So, some are hyped up. People first thought, from, back when I read when the first Iron Man came out, they thought Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, it's going to flop. It's going to suck. And they're up to 3. Plus, he's in, they've included the character in the Avengers, so he was a hit. They followed through with the DS game. Yes, I played on my son's DS because I have 5 DSs in the house, but I never play them. I play my PSP. But I played that, and it was decent. It played a little bit on the story, but it seemed to go a little more in depth than the actual movie went into, which I found a little bit more interesting because just, hop, skip, and jump from, okay, I'm going to break out of prison, and, they went straight to him going back and blowing that up, actually taking the time to go through and blow up each part of the terrain, the bases in the game was really fun. So instead of just a quick run through, maybe video screenplay like some games would do where they show you the film of them going to do it. It was pretty interesting to go through and actually do it yourself.
Mhm. That's another problem I have with these games is that when you're basing yourself on a movie, um, you have to start making things up for the game, and then that you really get into hit and miss territory. Because some games, the protagonist doesn't really do much in the movie, yet in the game he's doing a shit ton, and it can kind of mess with the atmosphere. But we're gonna get which is generally better or worse between these two, and I'm actually going to say the best you can hope for the first time around is to get a good movie based on a game, because so long as it isn't made by Uwe Boll, you've got a okay chance that it will turn out fairly well, and that is also split with the chance that it will be so bad that it's good, a la House of the Dead, which really fit into that category. And I hear they're still trying to work out a Halo movie.
I thought they actually dropped that and just let it die.
I would hope so. It's been going on for so long. But
'Cause
I
it's
hear
one of
they're
those-
thinking about a Mass Effect movie.
I heard about that one. I've heard about an Assassin's Creed movie.
That I have heard of, Assassin's Creed. I heard that they are working on that.
Assassin's Creed is one of those games where the way you play it would actually transition pretty well to a movie, because unless you're blade happy, then most of the time you're spending your entire level just setting up to kill one person.
I'm going to say some movies I think that would be really good because it does balance a good story versus good gameplay that haven't even been taken into production yet. Yes, Hideo Kojima goes nuts with hours and hours of videos, but I think that the Metal Gear franchise could make for a really good movie because of society and the way they could play into the anonymous. If anybody pays attention to Twitter and blogging and the Occupy Wall Street, the anonymous movement, and the games kind of really follow along with. It's funny to look back at Sons of Liberty. I hate Raiden, so I'll go with you guys on that. But going back and looking at it and looking at the way Hideo Kojima was thinking then, and you look at what's going on now with SOPA, PIPA, and everything else they're trying to push through on internet privacy, and even now drone strikes, so on and so forth, and you're like, this man was a fortune teller.
You
That or
never
he's
know.
involved with the Illuminati.
There you go. That and Assassin's Creed, I think the mixture of gameplay and all would be good for that. Going on Wrath of the Titans and Clash of the Titans, God of War. I think if you tone down the sexual innuendos, but unfortunately, part of that is what makes God of War. I think God of War could make for a strong movie. But the problem is that they're going to take these games that are so great, and they're going to tone them down to where it just completely goes off base. But the stories are there in games like that. That you
Yeah,
have
God
a
of War
storyline
movie
you
would
can go with.
reach almost horror movie levels of gore. Um, though friends and I have actually considered it. It could make a very good movie if they played it right, but it would need a very good special effects budget and a writer who actually gave a shit.
Which one's that?
Uh, God of War.
God of War, you agree?
Yeah.
I have to say, I think God of War could make for an excellent movie. I mean, especially like I said, with Wrath of the Titans, Clash of the Titans really taking off better than some people expected. Right now would be the prime time for movie developers to be thinking, well, we've been making all these video game movies. Let's look at past hits. But of course, God of War hasn't seen a release in a little bit, so no, they're not going to play on the popularity. They'll wait till they release a new game.
Yeah, the big one
I
I'm
think
looking.
Hey
Go
guys, I
for
think
it.
we should release a Call of Duty movie.
They kind of piggyback on each other if you look at it, really. Hollywood and video game designers, they kind of piggyback off each other on what's popular. If you see a very, very popular game, which I'm amazed I never saw when Vice City hit, I never saw a movie hit on that because that was insanely popular. But I think they kind of knew that was a little too mature. You're going to have an NC-17 rating on that or something, just because of everything in it. But I mean,
Yeah, a game I would like to see transition to the big screen after the success of Tron Legacy. I'd like to see the Tron Evolution game get a movie release because it's actually a really good game, constantly overlooked probably because it was released the same Christmas as a World of Warcraft expansion. Um,
Bad idea.
yeah, I believe it and Epic Mickey were the only things that released that year.
the
Kinda.
boss is supposed to be pretty quiet, Eddie. So what's your thoughts on what you'd like to see out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're the
That's,
avid gamer here. You said it
I know. The thing
yourself.
is, for me, I want to see the Assassin's Creed movie. I want to see how it would play out. I don't know exactly who you could get to play as, maybe the big main assassin in the movie. If you would like rewrite it as a whole new entire thing, because in the games you have Altair and Ezio and now Connor, which is you rank them up. But
And you've got the overarching story of Desmond.
yes, you have that. But it's like, okay, who are you gonna get to possibly play Desmond, or even It's one of those things where it's like, there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of, just questions I could throw around in there. Let's see, what else? They've already done Final Fantasy, and they kind of.
Well, it depends on which Final Fantasy, really.
The first movie was bleh. The Advent Children, where they stuck with 7, was pretty good. I honestly, other than Assassin's Creed, can't really pick a game that I would be like, ZOMG, I would go and see it. Because I think they would botch the hell out of most of the game that you would see in there.
I think it's all about just having something popular to work with and a good story. I mean, they've let some good ones really move out, like, let's go with Ninja Gaiden. You had a good story back with the original game, and when they re-released it, it was a really good game. They should have piggybacked on that and picked up on it. Ninja Gaiden was very good when they re-released it.
I'm surprised Ninja Gaiden didn't at least get an animated movie. Um, yeah, one of the things I've found is for movies, you need the popularity of the game is what they tend to piggyback on, and they just use that as a crutch to make as much money they can in the short term. But they don't really go for long term by making a good story, making the movie memorable. But we are running a little long, and we've said about all we need to say. We have been the Midnight Gaming Podcast and something.
Penguin!